From a prominent American acting family, he found a way to step out of the shadows with Easy Rider and Ulee's Gold. Hi, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on Interviews, our conversation with Peter Fonda. Do you find that the work you were doing in the 60s has paid off for your career today?
Some of the work, yeah. In particular, Easy Rider. If you can imagine, I thought in 1960, early 63, no, late 62, I had read a novel called Lilith. I wanted to buy the novel so I could produce the film and play one of the subordinate roles. It never occurred to me that Hollywood would look at this skinny 22-year-old who looked about 15 and not see a possible producer. I just thought, well, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
And I realized that it wasn't just that I was 22, that I wasn't going to be seen as anything other than Henry Fonda's son until somehow I kicked out that whole thing. And Easy Rider did that for me, of course. And it kicked me away from my father's monumental shadow. But I had no idea that it would create an even more monumental shadow. And it would be much harder for me to get out from under that. So in a way, it did everything, the 60s, to the rest of my career.
Yeah.
I can pull The Hired Hand into that because I read The Hired Hand, my first directorial picture, in 69, even though I didn't shoot it until 70. I made the deal in 69, so we'll say that's still part of the 60s.
Do you ever wish Easy Rider had been later in your career? I know the time had to be right for it and all that, but for everything that changed with that film, would you have liked to have had a little more time as yourself before something like that defined your career?
No, I think I'll settle for what happened in the way it happened, and that particular time, as young as I was, and so idealistic to think that anything was possible still, and not driven into a corner or a niche or a category. But I have to tell you, at the same time, I knew as I was writing this, and I was in the west coast of France, in Roscoff for that matter. Although I started the story in Toronto, Canada, I was now writing further into it, developing the scenes more. I knew that I was going to go big with it, big enough to get off the land. I wanted to get away from the land. Therefore, I guess part of that is getting away from being pigeonholed, being thought of as Henry Fonda's son and everything. A great deal of it is I would gladly tell my friends and acquaintances and strangers then and now that if you think you have private property, don't pay your taxes. You will find out who owns your private property. Right. And on my sailboat, there were no taxes. The government could take the boat only if they declared martial law, and my attorneys are good enough to give me a 2-week heads up on that one, and I'm out. You have to fine me. And the fact that I bought totally into the nut of international maritime law, which is something that Billy Bly knew all about. That is, the captain's word is law. So I bought totally into the sovereignty of being on that sailing ship.
Yeah.
That my word was law, and nothing could come on that yacht or that ship that I didn't want to have happen. I controlled it, and therefore I could be a kid, I could be serious, because I am a master celestial navigator. I could do all those things and do them in a semi-private way and be totally free. Totally free. That's too big a phrase. When you're traveling 20 days between landfall, you're in a different world. You live on a different planet than the rest of the people. The rest of the people don't even see the planet they're living on. Otherwise, why would we foul this nest so badly and so forth? But out there, you live in a world of constant change, and what would seem to be constant similarity.
So what brought you back to the land then?
I had to pay for the boat. Somebody had to pay to buy new lines, men's sails, that kind of stuff. And so I'd come back to do a movie.
But you live on land today.
Now I live on land, but I've took the sovereignty of the ship back on the land with me. Yes, I'm in deep doo-doo because of the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
But guess what? I'm going to stick to the sovereignty part, and bullets are going to take that one. I know eventually they've got more planes than I do. The Patriot Act will roll over me, and I will become a part of the pavement. But I sure will give up a hell of a fight before that.
Does it disappoint you, sadden you to see where we are today as a country, considering everything you were working toward in the 60s?
I am disgusted. I am saddened, too. But I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted with my fellow men. I'm disgusted with the people on the earth that don't understand. We're like a ferry in Bangladesh or on Manila Bay. We're so overloaded. This planet was not designed to carry as many people as it's carrying. Yet every second, 10,000 babies are born. We don't understand. The Pope says contraceptive is not an acceptable thing for Catholicism, while he tours through war-torn, ravaged-torn, famished-torn Africa. Hello? Yeah. Are we not listening because we don't want to? Or do we listen just to what we think is right for us? Or are the people that are talking, are they just moving their lips and have no voice?
How do you see the connection between overpopulation and what happened on 9/11? How does all of that tie in together?
It's an ignorance of what's going on in the world. 9/11 is an ignorance not of the intelligence community per se. The intel should have been there. But the intel should have been based on something that's, what is it, almost 1,200 years old? The Crusades. We are the infidels, man. Yeah. We are supposed to be killed. Period.
Is there
what
any way
what
to
do we
stop
not
all
know
this?
about that would make us think, what have we done to upset those people? Because 99% of all terrorists in the world now are 14 to 35-year-old Islamic men. Now we're finding out there's a few women thrown in there. They have been festering for 1,000 years. What have we done in the last 15 years that has aggravated that pimple and brought it to such a head that when it's popped, it takes down the World Trade Center, it takes down the Pentagon, it takes down embassies in Nairobi, and what are we paying attention to?
Yeah.
We're not paying attention to those particular specific politics, but we're not paying attention to the fact that this world is out of whack. Quantiskotsky was made a long time ago, and it's still applicable, and it will be forever. We do not understand that we've overloaded the gun, and it will blow the whole thing up when we pull the trigger. We don't understand that we've overloaded the ferry, whatever it is, the planet, and in sense of reality, we don't realize that we're killing everything that we need to stay alive. Given that mindset, it's not surprising to me that finally a group could get together with enough dose that we'll hit them back, and hit them back big. Our intel should have done away with that, should have seen that coming. It hasn't been unnoticed. I mean, Lockerbie did happen. That did happen. Munich in '72 did happen. All these things have happened. They're not somebody's fictional attitude of what's going on in this world.
Can you stop them from happening then? We've been trying in different ways, and maybe we're not using the right way, but is it something, a goal that can really be reached? Can you stop terrorism?
By taking away the freedom of the United States, yes. By taking away the freedom of the citizenry of the United States, yes. Can you stop terrorism against us that way? And that's so oppressive that we don't want to go there. Well, most of us don't want to go there. But, in terms of worldwide, I don't know, especially when we're dealing with religious war, which is where I didn't want to get into that quite this early, but we're involved with and have been for thousands of years, religious war. And religion, I'm not an atheist either, but religion is all a bunch of hooey. It's my God's better than your God? Hold on.
Yeah.
Which one did the Big Bang? Oh, well, the Big Bang never happened. Actually, it all was this earth, and then everything else became after God created this. You know, oh my God. Who is not listening? We aren't listening.
Take me back for a minute, because this is something that I wonder about. Here you are, being born into a privileged family, and should have been poor little rich kid growing up, everything. Why do you care about these things? Your sister also. Why are you folks involved? You guys aren't the ones that probably should have been the freedom fighters. How did that happen? What was in you as children in your upbringing that you think led you to who you are today?
In our upbringing as children, I would right out the door and probably too quickly say nothing, because our father didn't say anything to us. But I was brought up in a family that offered no idea of bigotry, of racism, of different cultures that were therefore different from us. And then, in other words, divisiveness was not part of my youth, my upbringing. The second part of that question, I would say, is intelligence, education, and sometimes self-education, because the real education was simply not providing the questions. The answers are irrelevant, don't you understand, in my mind. The questions are interesting. And it's, if you want to go for the answer, slow the whole process down, because we've all been taught to go for the answer. Think in school, didn't your teachers, when you're given a quiz and they're correcting your papers or checking it, where did they go to find the answers? In the back of the book. Are those teachers that have to go to the back of the book to find the answers, or are they just conducting a class?
Right.
And they're not teachers if they have to look for the answer. They should know and understand if it was a properly, if the question was posed properly, that the answer will flow from it. There is the process then. Inside the question, if you slow the process down and not look too fast for the answer, inside the question the answer exists. The moment you fully understand the question, you have the answer. And you can move on to the next question. Now that is true mind expansion without the use of any narcotics or illegal substances.
So when did you realize that?
Realize which part?
Realize the part about the, once you take apart the question, you can find your answer.
I had my own proof of it. I was doing it, but my own real proof came to me. I never finished my, I went to a prep school, we call it our fifth form, sixth form, but just because most of the people in the U.S. didn't, and public television has access to the whole country. Let's say I never finished my junior year in high school. I never did my senior year in high school. I began college as a sophomore. Many things happened to make that, but just to stick to this answer, I had, in the process of doing certain things, I was testing myself. I was being tested at a university, the University of Omaha. It was ranked number 5 in municipal colleges back in 1957. And I was a nutcase, 17-year-old, angst-ridden, crazed person, thinking I was absolutely going bonkers and they were going to send me down the river. And during a series of testings of aptitude, which I agreed with my father's sister, my Aunt Harriet, that I should probably take these tests because I wasn't going to go back to school. So I didn't just stop pumping gas. I could go after something that I had an aptitude and interest in. And then in doing those tests, the last 3 days of those tests, which was a week and a half period, were one test in the morning, one test in the afternoon, and the last third test the next morning. They were multiple question tests. The top of each of the sets were cut away, so I didn't know what they applied to, but I understood multiple questions, multiple answer questions. Tests that happened to me, multiple choice. And very few times is it all of the above or none of the above. So I would break down the question. I was taught this in grade school, breaking down a sentence, in order to make sense of it. Breaking it down. finding the right words, knowing what things are intransitive verbs and transitive verbs, and which are descriptives, and all that. Breaking it down to find the key word, looking down through the 5 possibilities, and finding someplace in those possibilities something that reflected the same as the key word, and marking that. So the first test, I got 92% right. The second test, I got 98% right, maybe 97% right. And the next day, the third test, I learned I got all of them right. And Dean William Thompson was the Dean of Liberal Arts of this college. He was also a practicing psychologist, Dr. William Thompson. His daughter, just by the chance of throwing in some spice, is married to Warren Buffett. Nevertheless, poor Dr. Thompson, he had to deal with me far out. I went into his office, my hackles were up, man. What are we going to tell little Petey boy? Why did you cheat? I went ballistic. He had some nice antique furniture in the office. I immediately thought, which chair do I break first? I jumped up on his desk. I screamed at him every invective you could think of and stuff that I was making up off the top. I mean, unfortunately, I can't tell you these words.
Thank you.
Some of them are extraordinarily interesting, however.
I'm sure.
But, you know, I went ballistic, yelling at him, screaming at him, crying, tears spurting out on my... But he was trying to calm me down. And he's throwing out in my bed, and he's finally, I hear this, but you weren't supposed to get them right. But you weren't, and finally, get what right? The answers to those multiple choice tests, I got them right. I got them all right. You didn't know? No. And how could I have cheated? I never knew what I was going to do. I couldn't bring a cheat sheet in.
Right.
Nobody told me. I was just handed a piece of paper and told, go to work. And that's how I found out I got 92, 98, then 90. And I asked what the tests were for. They were entrance exams to Stanford, to the USC system, and to the University of Omaha. But that process then, I mean, William Thompson said, you mean you guessed at them? And I quickly had to stand up for myself. I said, it's a little more devious than that. And that was breaking down the question, understanding the question. I'm given 5 chances then, and finding the key word. That has translated itself into a much more progressive and tolerable way of dealing with life. Understand this question, whatever the question is. Once you understand the question, the answer is inherent in it. Whether it's written on a page or if it's a larger question like what's happening in the world. Is there something we can do about it? What can we do about it? That delivers me into being the activist. That delivers me into being the person who wants to speak for other people or at least wake the room up. If they're sound asleep or following a mantra. There are no mantras. There are no time for mantras. There are those Zen things that we can keep inside ourselves that calm ourselves down, allow us to see things more clearly, allow us to deal with things more rationally around us. But those aren't mantras because they're not repetitive. Each one is a new problem. You have to have yourself open and ready. Hence the idea of understanding the question is opening and ready, and the answer will come for it. And you can use that, and it will get you more powerful. Each time you become more powerful.
Okay, I'm going to turn in a whole different direction here.
Fantastic. Coming about.
Okay, I look through your career. You were in Circus of the Stars and Circus of the Stars 2.
Yep.
What was your act?
I don't know. Circus of the Stars 1, I was in this box, and Claudia Cardinelli, God bless her soul, was sticking these swords through the box. I still don't remember how it happened, but I, of course, get out of it.
Yeah.
Or maybe I stuck it into Claudia. Maybe it was that. The sexual innuendo and all. And this is all uncensored, right? We're going for it flat out. And Circus of the Stars 2, I was with, oh gosh, I can't remember the actress's name. Beautiful gal. And she was on a trapeze and I was on a motorcycle on like a high rope.
Right.
And it would come to one point when we'd do a whole 360 around. And unfortunately, I think she was a little heavier than I was. So when she was on the bottom, the damn motorcycle was on top and spilling gas on me. So I didn't do any more Circus of the Stars.
We go for the career highlights here. That's what we want to talk about.
That was a good one. I didn't know you'd pull that out.
All of the stuff that you know, did that make you a better father from your experiences, from the things, or was it difficult to be a father having all this information, and how do you impart that onto a child or children?
Well, let me frame it in the idea that a month before I turned 24, I became a father. Mm-hmm. I looked at my own sons, and at least, thank God, when they were 24, they were not a parent. I could afford it financially. And there's this child that lives in with me even now. And this child really attached itself to my children. My daughter said to Buzz magazine something that she found that I was much more spiritual and closer to her than her schoolmates' parents were to them, and that I had this way of living life to its fullest. And she used an example, and I had these huge speakers, big Bozak auditorium speakers, on rollers. I rolled them out to my tennis court and cranked up high cream, white room, and got on my skateboard and was just whipping around the tennis court because I knew how to move the skateboard without doing too much kicking. Once you get going, you can do this little, like the hula hoop move. You can make the skateboard zip around. And there was my daughter on a tricycle, trying to keep up with me. And I never talked down to my kids. I talked straight across to them. And I was fascinated with them. There was something extraordinary about them, not because they were mine, but because I never had a childhood really myself, and I never perceived the growth of a child, although I had my adopted sister, Amy, since she was like 14 months old, and she lived, and her room was right next to mine in our brownstone in New York, and I would go in and try to calm her down at night by singing to her and playing songs to her. But I was too young then to get across to it. But here, this was my issue. Yeah. And this is, unfortunately, a word that's misused today. We have issues. I mean, do you have children too? And that was my issue, and that so much had been put upon me as the issue of Henry Fonda, that I was finding out that connection really didn't amount to jack. It doesn't matter. It's who you are yourself. What does matter is what happens around you and how it affects you and what's kept from you or what's given to you. So much was kept from me. It's in certain moments beyond or past that moment where everything was possible in my life when I was this young man living this kid, living without bigotry, racism, not knowing any of that stuff. Getting a little older, then becoming a parent and relating to my kids as a kid, because it's the 8-year-old in me that gets paid to do what I do. Yeah. No, that's not true. It's the reverse. It's the 8-year-old in me that can pretend without question to do anything. Once you're 9, you want to be 10. You want to have 2 digits. Once you have the 2 digits, you want to have "een" at the end of your age. Right. But when you're 8, you don't even think about anything else. You can be the Indian, or you can be the cowboy. You can be a cop. You can be anything. Nothing's impossible at that moment in your life. It's a glorious, eye-opening moment if you're given that opportunity.
How do you feed that 8-year-old? How do you make sure you don't lose him?
Well, fortunately, what I've chosen to do as a livelihood, that 8-year-old depends upon, and that livelihood depends upon the 8-year-old, because I can pretend to be the beekeeper from North Florida as easily as I can pretend to be the scumbag record producer from the Limey. I'm the slimy. Terrence Stamp was the slimy. I played the slimy. But that 8-year-old allows you to cut loose. You're not afraid to show it all. Yeah. I'm a trained stage actor. If you can imagine the terror it would cause some people to unzip in front of 800 to 1,500 people and say, "There it is," take your best shot, because basically that's what an actor does. As I teach and lecture in the media and theater arts, I discuss these things. And by a perfect example, I directed Dwight Yoakam a play, the first time that he was really going to be in a big time in a play in Los Angeles. And in giving notes after the performances, and they were always given before the next performance, just before it. And one talks to the characters as their character, not for Mr. Fonda, you do this, not for Mr. Jones, you do that. I'd say, Miss Rogers, come down for the stage right, make sure you get in your light more, so forth. And Tommy Joe Blaine, Dwight Yoakam, Tommy Joe, you're fine, smile when you take a bow. I don't have to. Tommy Joe, smile when you take your bow. I don't have to. They didn't laugh at this. Tommy Joe, whether they laugh or not, smile and bow. And if they throw vegetables at you, smile with meaning, because you'll know you have food to bring home and put on the plate. Got it, Tommy Joe? Smile. So Dwight's first bow and smiles, that was a smile. The next evening, Tommy Joe, make your smile laugh 18 beats longer.
Well, we're going to have to stop with that smile right there. We're out of time. Thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you for having me.
Peter Fonda. To order a transcript, call 866-652-3378 or send $6.95 to the address on your screen. Please include the name of the guest.